left Transformers, one of the main reasons I left was that I was trying to develop my own character that would have its own book, and that became Sleepwalker. So I left Transformers in '89 sometime, and developed Sleepwalker, and I think the first issue of Sleepwalker published in April or May of '91. And yeah, so Sleepwalker was very exciting for me because that became the first book that I put out that was a character of my own creation. Whereas Transformers, although I contributed to the creation of the characters, I certainly didn't design the toys. I didn't come up with the concept for Transformers, the name of Transformers. The Transformers was obviously a team effort, and I was part of that team. So, but Sleepwalker was something I designed. I designed the look of it. I came up with the concept of it, and then I became the writer of the book. I was in charge of the new projects committee. Although when it came to Sleepwalker, I recused myself. Obviously, I couldn't judge Sleepwalker as part of that committee, but the other members of the committee did. So I would say, typically, many more ideas were turned down than were accepted by the new projects committee, for whatever reasons. I don't remember the particular projects and the particular reasons, but they were too derivative. They weren't. The protagonist wasn't empathetic enough. The idea wasn't fleshed out enough. There was no conflict. There was all sorts of reasons why something might not see the light of day at Marvel anyway. So it was really tough to get anything approved at the new project through the new project committee. Ultimately, the new project committee would greenlight a project here, a project there, and once they greenlighted it, it would be kicked upstairs to the editor-in-chief for him to consider. So Sleepwalker was one of those projects that made it through the system, and it did come back to me, I think, at least 1 or 2 times from the editor-in-chief with comments saying, you need to fix this, you need to work on that, and so I, continued to revise it and tweak it until it got to a point where it was approved and became a monthly comic book for Marvel. The way Sleepwalker came to me was from an editorial meeting that we had perhaps in 1984, 1985. At that meeting, then editor Jim Shooter, who had previously worked for DC Comics writing Superman and Superboy and a Legion of Superheroes. I forget what point he was trying to make, but he was using Superman as an illustration for his point. He was saying, if Superman really came to Earth, instead of everybody accepting him as a hero, probably the nations of the Earth would kind of band together and try to figure out a way to defend themselves against this guy, because he represented a real threat. And by the way, a little side note, ironically, that's been the premise of the last 2 Superman movies. 30 plus years later, that's the premise they picked up on for the current storyline with Superman in the movies. But aside from that, that idea kind of planted the seed of Sleepwalker in my head, because I said to myself, well, what if instead of an alien superpowered being coming to Earth who has good intentions and happens to look like the all-American hero, which is Superman, instead of that, what if you took that idea and you spun it on its head? Because Superman is just accepted, at least at that time in the 1980s, just accepted as a hero because he looks like a hero, he acts like a hero. People don't even necessarily know he's an alien all the time, although he obviously is. What if he took a character who has also good intentions, but looks like a bug-eyed monster? And that was the seed of Sleepwalker. Sleepwalker had a decent run. It lasted almost 3 years. I think it lasted 33 issues. Sales started dropping. Sales always drop with new books. There's always an initial rush of excitement that pumps sales up for the first few issues. Sales started dropping. It's really difficult for me to say why sales dropped. The book was popular for a while. The stories might not have found the audience that I was trying to find with him. Or I know after issue 17 there was a change of artist, and I think that might have had an effect. I think the artist that we had initially, Brett Blevins, was phenomenal and did a great job and got the look just as I was hoping it would be. But after that, the look changed, so that may have had an effect. But in any case, the book started floundering as far as sales, and a decision was made to cancel it. And I don't remember exactly when it was exactly when I was told it was going to be canceled, but I was given enough time to wind up some storylines and write a couple of extra, a couple more issues to kind of tie up the loose ends, which I've appreciated. I think at the time I created Sleepwalker, it might have been a little bit of an anomaly because comics were pretty dark and gritty and despairing back then. Sometimes I read comics that I felt after I read them that I'd just been like dragged through the mud for 22 pages, and they weren't a lot of fun. And I was trying to bring a different flavor into comics, something that I grew up with, which was these are serious issues, serious things happening to people, but there was a lighter touch to it, and there was some sunlight at the end of the issue. There was some happy moments. There were people that you liked that weren't just always ragging on other people and being negative about everything. So I was trying to bring some of that in there, and maybe that didn't fit the time. It's hard to say. With Sleepwalker, I felt in many ways a much stronger connection to than the Transformers, because the Transformers was a product being put out by Hasbro, and I had to attach names and personalities to a bunch of these toys, and then another bunch of toys would come along, and another bunch, and it was never my property. It was something I contributed to. Whereas Sleepwalker, came out of my head. I felt a much deeper connection to it, and so I was really hoping it would take off and be everything I would hope it would be. And it lasted for a while, and I was kind of saddened a bit, perhaps, that the book didn't last as long as I might have wanted it to at the time. When I worked on Sleepwalker, I did what I wanted to do on it, at least the first, dozen or 2 dozen issues. Like this is really the book I want to put out there. So I'm happy I'm happy I had the opportunity to do that. So if would I have done anything differently? Well, if I was a different person, I would have done things differently. But I set out to do certain things, and I did them. So you never know of how things are going to work out and how things aren't. Like if you look at some of the more popular Marvel movies of late, they're based on characters that were virtually lost to memory. People didn't know these. These are characters that existed for a flash of time, and then they flashed out, and then they get picked up again, and they get forgotten again. So you never know when you put something out there. It may not have created its the impact you wanted it to at that time, but it could get picked up again by somebody else, and somebody can do something that takes it to a new level. You just never know. But I was very happy that I was able to do a lot of what I set out to do with Sleepwalker.